Amen.
I think I just caught that.
Good.
Do we remember what we're doing? Hello and welcome to the Calvary Cast. It's been a long time. Kind of. I am Graham Parker, across the table from my co-host, Jess Miller. Welcome to the program. You're not going to say anything?
No, it's going well, man. Yeah, sounds like you got it covered, and the music was going. I was enjoying that.
Was going. So we've been away for a while. We took our summer break earlier than other podcasts take their summer break. Right, some podcasts take an entire summer. We took a month of May, basically, and now we are back with tons of exciting content lined up for you. We are going to explain gravity.
Yep.
Explain the theory of relativity.
Yep.
Just all sorts of scintillating conversations lined up for the rest of the summer. So you don't have to worry about not having anything to listen to on road trips and
That's right.
journeys to work and things like that.
Are we able to play the alphabet or no, they won't?
Oh, I could insert that, but it wouldn't be quite as good. I could pause it and go grab it. Do you really want the alphabet song?
How much time would it take you to do it?
A minute.
Let's do it.
All right, we're back. Check this out.
Aleph, Beten, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and Vav, and Zayin. Chiten, Teten, Yod, and Kaf, and Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, and Tzaddik, Kuf, and Resh, and Sin, and Shin, and Tav, Havenu, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Alechem. Aleph, Beten.
All right, nobody else wants to listen to it again. What was the point of that?
We're going to introduce the fact that we're going to start speaking in tongues. Here at Calvary. Yeah. No, actually, that is the biblical Hebrew alphabet.
There you go.
Song.
Yeah.
And we're studying Hebrew this summer.
There we go. That's
you and me.
That's the plan. We're gonna try and learn the Hebrew. I can't even learn the song. So.
And I'll tell you, I studied Hebrew
Mm-hmm.
for part of my MDiv, but have lost a lot of my Hebrew. And so I was like,
so we're
let's
almost
do
on
this.
equal footings, but not
I
quite.
think so, yeah. I mean,
Not
I
quite.
might have a little bit ahead of you and that, but and things will start clicking more quickly for me because A, I'm smarter, and B, I've had it before. But
Jeepers.
yeah, it's important. We got to step on it. And I'm in the New Testament so much, which
Right.
is Greek. And even that, I lose some of the technical aspects of it and constantly have to be reminded of things. And but to do two biblical languages is really challenging to keep it in your brain and keep it fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. If you can memorize the Hebrew alphabet for fun and join us
There you go.
in our thing. Also, if you hear any weird white background noise, it's just the swamp coolers running because it is smoking hot today.
Yep.
And we're not shutting them off because it is too hot. So you can endure the white background noise. Anyway, we're back, and that is all the banter I have.
All right.
I feel like
we're
out of practice on the banter aspect.
So today we're jumping back into Upper Room Discourse.
Yes.
Part
John
3. 13. And we'll just kind of briefly look at and talk about some things from verses 21 to 38. So,
Do you want me to read this?
Yeah, why don't you read it?
Since you're going to do most of the talking. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "What you are going to do, do quickly." Now no one at the table knew why he had said this to him. Some thought that because Jesus had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, Where I am going you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Jesus answered, Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times.
Very good. So just a reminder, we're in the, we called it the upper room discourse, and it's the night before the crucifixion. And so Jesus is in that upper room. And John gives us 5 chapters of material for that time that we don't get in the other synoptic gospels, and the ones that talk about, him establishing the new covenant, giving the Lord's Supper and things. So we have a lot of good information up here that we didn't have, and some of this is part of that, including where we'll land here in just a few minutes, and that's the new commandment of verse 34. So before that, let's just think about these first verses, and once again, we see Jesus, verse 21, is troubled in his spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And he was troubled earlier in John chapter 12 when the Greek people came to him, and he knew it was his hour had come, right? So he's understanding. He knew already why he was going to Jerusalem, but this in his spirit, he is just troubled. And this time it's because there's one of the 12 that's going to betray him.
Right.
And he knows this.
Okay.
So that, a number of things we could derive from that. We won't spend much time on it, but one thing I thought of is the idea that Jesus is in control of this whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he knows what's going to happen and did nothing to stop it, and even knew Judas was going to betray him.
Right. Wait, are you talking about derived from the trouble in his spirit or just the fact of his knowledge?
Well, both.
Both.
Yeah,
right.
I guess that's what I'm saying. I mean, he's troubled by it. I mean, it's a very human reaction to everything going on, and I see in that, though there's no explanation in the text, but I'm thinking there's a troubling in his spirit, in part, at least, because of his love for Judas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, I'm thinking, or like,
he doesn't hate him.
Right. And just the idea of this one who has walked with him, part of that 12, and so much part of the 12 that even when Jesus makes this, announces it, they still don't know who it is.
Right.
And even when Judas is dismissed,
they still don't understand what he's going to do.
No, like they had no thought that it was him.
Right.
And he was one of the 12 in that way. Yeah. And then, and the idea of him, washing Judas's feet previous to this, and just serving him by giving him the morsel of bread and doing these things, these acts of perhaps even, Jesus knows in the sovereignty of God this was going to happen, everything, but in that very human way of feeling it.
Well, yeah, you see, especially that, I think that humanity aspect, chapter 12, though, when he says, I'm troubled, and he's looking forward to his hour coming as well, right? That's a very human reaction because he knows the pain he's going to endure, the weight and the wrath of God bearing sin. Yeah. So
I think we can't ever watch Jesus or think of Jesus as this, robot type of figure, right? Stoic or whatever. I mean, he was feeling everything that was happening to him.
Very emotional.
Yeah. And even just 2 chapters ago, chapter 11, that was part of my devotional time this morning, and his whole weeping at the tomb of Lazarus, seeing everything going on, feeling the emotion of whatever moment he was in. He felt it fully as a perfect human being. And so the fact that Judas was going to betray him affected him, and he was troubled by this.
That, again, just relates to his ability to be a compassionate, empathetic Savior.
Yep.
Faithful high priest.
Right, exactly. So we see that humanity in Jesus, and yet the control of the whole situation. Verse 27, after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him, obviously Judas. Jesus said to him, what you are going to do quickly. And then Judas did that, verse 30. After receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. Now, some of the commentators make an issue about that, and it was night, a theological issue about it.
Oh, interesting.
The idea being as one commentator put it, he was enveloped in the darkness of it, just...
More than just an hour of the day. They're seeing something about Judas.
That John might have been pointing that. But you think about that even as I was pondering this yesterday in Judas, the utter darkness of the situation he's in. And Jesus even saying it would be better for that man had he never been born, you know, and the eternal consequences of his actions. That's powerful and frightening, actually, and I'm sure raises lots of questions in people's minds about it. But it's important to see these things, and so at any rate, okay, go ahead.
Well, no, so I'm just saying all of this is setting up for maybe the main point of the passage. Is that kind of what you would, if we're going to get to this new commandment and all of that? One, it's interesting. He doesn't issue the new commandment till Judas goes out.
That's right. Yeah,
that is an interesting fact. So all of this is kind of preamble.
Yeah,
in a sense to where we're going next, right?
Right.
Okay.
I would suspect, and I think I'm right on this too, but that in the order of events, the Lord's Supper not instituted till Judas was dismissed as well. And that's how the other Gospels...
Why does it say that he gave him the morsel, or he dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas?
Well, remember, this is part of a whole
meal
or whatever. So when they get to where Jesus is inaugurating the Lord's Supper, I think the other Gospel writers...
seem to place it after Judas.
It's not for him. But he then announces... Well, he says this, and you and I were just talking about this phrase in verse 31. Mm-hmm. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once."
That's a lot of hymns and a lot of himselfes.
Yeah, and a lot of glorification.
A lot of glorification, yeah. Wait, thanks, John. You really cleared it up for us.
Yeah, so we kind of broke that down, though, into a few elements.
Right. Well, because here's another. I'll ask this question before we get to this. How is this connected to what we're going to see in the new commandment? There has to be a connection there, right? He doesn't just jump from the glorification of the Son.
Right. Well,
so
maybe in part of what we're thinking, or what we were talking about earlier, is that part of this glorification is in the Son's crucifixion,
right,
for the sins of his people,
right.
So that act of service and shame and pain and suffering and death and love for his people.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
He's being glorified in that, and then he'll give the new commandment in verse 34 to love one another just as I have loved you.
Right.
And John in his letter will say he laid down his life for us. We ought to lay down our lives for one another. So I think there's a connection there, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, we didn't go about, because I interrupted our progression with a question. Yeah. So we should explain what verse 31 and 32 kind of mean then.
Yeah, so now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. So we broke it down beginning with the concept of the Son of Man.
Right.
Because he refers to himself here as the Son of Man. That was the official title of Daniel 7. And let me actually read that because...
And before you get to that, because he introduces it, says, when he had gone out. So you speak about Judas going out. Mm-hmm. So there's something that has now changed. Uh-huh. Because John over and over throughout the gospel is referencing his hour and his glorification coming. So with Judas leaving and going to betray Jesus now, this has instituted finally the wheels of his betrayal and his coming death. Right. So therefore Jesus can say, I'm glorified now.
Yep.
Right.
And the hour that was coming
is now here.
Is now here.
Right.
And Judas leaving sets that all in motion, and they're about to go to.
And so and he is saying, I am glorified in this, and the Father is glorified in it.
Right. Yep.
People need to see my hands pointing to help
accentuate
the point.
Yeah. And Judas's actions of betrayal and the and the rejection of the Jewish leaders
Yes.
and a good percentage of the Jewish people generally rejecting Christ is bringing God's glory because it's part of his plan.
Yes.
Which is interesting because, and I just thought about this.
This is the way the whole podcast goes. So we like say something like, "Oh, but wait, this."
Exactly.
And people are lost.
Because I'm thinking about Romans 3, 1 through 8.
Yeah.
And the idea that what is the advantage of the Jew? Well, they were entrusted with the oracles of God. What if some were unfaithful? Does their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? And Paul will explain, God forbid, though every man is a liar, let God be true, though every man is a liar. And I'm working that through in a number of ways, but thinking in context of the Jews and how their rejection of God brings God glory and is according to his plan.
Through his son. Right?
Through his son, through, the actual act of the crucifixion,
Right.
that would tie in here.
Right.
But then even throughout the whole New Testament age, which is the age of the Gentiles coming in.
Yeah.
And God giving that partial hardening to the Jews so that the Gentiles will believe and are receiving the covenant promises, and then provoking the Jews' jealousy, but also he will be faithful to his promises to those people in the end when there's this wonderful restoration.
Right.
So even in our sermon on Sunday, I'm going to take some of that and we're going to end when in Ezekiel 36, which I think is so beautiful, that shows that God says, I'm going to bring you, and I'm going to do this for my own name's sake, for my own glory,
Right.
not because of you.
Right.
But I'm going to gather you from all the nations. I'm going to plant you back in your land. I'm going to do all these new covenant promises for you. And then all the nations that are surrounding you are going to see what I've done, and they're going to know that I am the Lord. I'm going to be faithful to my promises for the sake of my name. Yeah. And I just thought about all that. That's really cool how that it doesn't matter the response of the people to God. He's going to bring glory to himself.
Right.
Regardless of their response of unfaithfulness or lying or disbelief or whatever.
Well, it's like the prophets say that God's goal is that his glory covers the waters of his glory covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. I'm totally messing up that quotation and reference, but that's the idea. And isn't it interesting that ultimately though is completed through people, right?
Yeah.
Like through the bringing in of the Gentiles, right? That brings God glory. Yep. Just as the salvation of the Jews does too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So anyway, where were we?
Oh yeah, so Son of Man, and when you think of when they would think of Son of Man, this is what they thought of. Daniel 7:13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a Son of Man. There's that title, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented for him, and to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. That's glory, right?
Right.
Glory given to the Son of Man by God himself. Right. And so when they were thinking that, they're thinking of that glory, the Son of Man being glorified and being given these people and the kingdoms and everybody worshiping him.
Right. And if you think about the Old Testament prophets, when they're thinking about like future glory for Israel, it's like a renewed creation. It's peace and harmony and flourishing and all of that.
Yep.
But what Jesus seems to be saying when he's saying here, now I'm glorified, the Son of Man is glorified. Daniel's saying the Son of Man is given glory.
Yep.
Ultimately, that comes first through the cross.
Yeah, it comes first through the rejection, the betrayal,
right,
the crucifixion.
Right. All things we would say, that's not glory.
That's right. That's why it was a stumbling block to the Jews, right? This whole idea of Jesus going to the cross, he's making sure his people know, I'm being glorified in this.
Yeah.
God's being glorified in this. And so the cross is an emblem of shame, as we've sing in our psalm, but it's also an emblem of God's glory in, providing satisfaction for sins in Christ, demonstrating his righteousness and his love and mercy all through the cross of Christ, Christ being glorified, lifted up for all to come and believe him, all those things.
So, this is where, when we think about tragedies that happen in the world, and we know the theological truth that God will be glorified in those horrible things, but we don't always see the outcome of it. The cross is the perfect example of that, though, where we do see the outcome of it in many ways.
Yep.
With people being redeemed through the sacrifice of Christ.
Yeah.
So the same thing. So we can say, okay, God is faithful to be glorified through the greatest act of evil, if we could say that, in crucifying the Son of God.
Yeah.
Will he not be glorified in some way in a school shooting in Texas or something like that?
Right. Yeah.
You know, in cancer or any form of suffering, even though we may not see that outcome in our life, we know that ultimately
we know he will is being.
Right.
And even because I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about the LGBTQ plus agenda and just thinking, this is horrible. And this is like a big snowball effect happening. And because we had talked about it yesterday in part in the office and you know, hoping that the fallacies will be exposed and different things, and maybe this will diminish. But even if it doesn't, now I'm thinking as I'm sitting here looking at this, God remains faithful. God remains true, and God is and will be glorified.
Yeah.
Whether it be in, as we see in Romans 3:1-8, in forgiving sinners or condemning them.
Yeah.
Both ways, he's glorified in it, no matter what. So they saw that in this moment, they wouldn't have seen the Son of Man being glorified. Even these disciples, they wouldn't have got that. And God being glorified in him and all these things wouldn't have made they wouldn't have made sense to them at all until later.
Right.
Right. And then in verse 32, if God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glory him at once, probably referring to a short time in the future when the resurrected Christ would ascend into heaven and be glorified in the Father, right? With the Father, with the glory you share with the Father before the world.
Like he prays in John 17, Father, the hour has come, glorify your Son, the Son may glorify you. And then he says later on, and now, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you before the world existed.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So he will be in that same glory as the Father is.
That's right. There we go. So we've kind of got those down, right? We get a little more understanding of what he's
Hopefully so.
Glorying in him and in himself. We figured it out, I think. And then verse 33, little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me. And just as I said to the Jews, so now also I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. And he's referring here to the cross and the intervening period, most likely. And then he says this, verse 34, though, this is where we were headed. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So we think about that concept of the new commandment. It isn't as though the Old Testament doesn't command the people of Israel to love. Love your neighbor as yourself. But there is an intensified nature to this command. It's a new covenant a new commandment for a new covenant, as Carson said in his commentary. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. So that's first key phrase right there, the one another, right? This is a love that the disciples of Jesus were to have for one another, that they're still to have for one another, that they don't even have for anyone else. So it's a discernible discipleship love that they have for one another. This isn't talking about loving the world as Christ loved them. There may be implications to that, like, we love our neighbors ourselves. Sure. We do good to them. We show them love of Christ. But this is a love for specifically the people of God that is different.
Right. Unique.
That you wouldn't have or display for others. And it says, you love one another just as I have loved you. It's been heightened now in its intensity. You are also to love one another that way. And, we have this, you and I both have been using Be Thou My Vision. And it's an awesome liturgy that walks
Yep.
you through things. Well, part of it is always
the reading of the law.
the reading of the law. And
Yeah.
it's always things like this.
Yeah.
It's always things like love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul,
Right.
strength, mind, or love one another as I've loved you.
Right.
Because he issues it, it's law.
Right.
It's a new commandment.
Yeah.
And we immediately see it and feel, okay, I don't fulfill this as I should.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't love other disciples
Yeah.
just as Jesus loved
Right.
me.
Right.
You're like, what? And so immediately we're thankful already
For Jesus.
for Jesus and his perfect love.
Yeah.
And yet, in the new covenant, what do we get? Jesus will talk about John 14:15, the Spirit that enables us
Right.
to fulfill the commands
Yeah.
and to fulfill the law in ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we see what we're supposed to do, and we know that it is the Spirit that will produce this love in
Yeah.
us, and we begin taking those steps of obedience to
Yeah.
love the community of God. And I don't think we need to always understand that in terms of specifically emotional feelings, though
Right.
they should be there, brotherly love, brotherly
Right.
affection. But how does the Bible describe it? In just Jesus saying, as I am giving myself
Mm-hmm.
sacrificially in love
Right.
for you, I want you to do this for one another.
So, could perhaps be the greatest hindrance to love is like one, just selfishness.
Yeah.
Like, like if Jesus is saying love one another, demonstrated this way in self-sacrifice and things like that, I don't give of myself sacrificially towards another person if I'm kind of consumed with myself.
That's yeah,
Right?
it's impossible.
Like, it's impossible to do. So that means then I need to like die to myself and some of my desires and my pursuits in order to serve and love another.
Yeah. And it's all in this context of John 13 where he had just humbled himself and washed their feet.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And he says, I want you to do this for one
Right.
another like I've done to
Right.
you. And it's similar in what he's saying here.
Right.
It's that humility. It's the putting others' interests above your own. It's the serving the people of God, providing for them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
John talks about if you see a brother in need, you close up
That's
your
what I was
heart for
just
him.
gonna
You
say.
don't love him. Right?
Exactly. Because that's where I think the New Testament, because we can also read that and we like, okay, love one another. That's a big command.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not extremely specific as far as to like how that looks like.
Right.
Right. And so that's where it's helpful. The New Testament gives so many other examples of what
That's
New
right.
Testament brotherly love looks like. And yeah, John is a perfect example in just showing, taking care of one another's needs.
Mm-hmm.
I think simple things like just kindness,
Yep.
that's
That's right.
that's a form of love, just being kind to somebody
Mhm.
else. And we can often think like, well, I am kind, but you can also come across as not kind,
Right.
right? Just in how you interact with other people and
Yeah.
things like that. So
Yeah.
those are forms of
Sacrificial, encouraging, serving, caring,
praying
for, and then just giving of your time and emotion and energy and all those things for other people. Maybe we're all guilty to it to an extent at times in our lives. I've encountered people that as soon as serving others becomes difficult, challenging, requiring of sacrifice, whatever it may be, they don't do it anymore. They want to stop. They want out. And why is that? Because that's what all of it is, all ministry is, inconvenient. Jesus' whole ministry was inconvenient, if you think about it. And going to the cross was very inconvenient and uncomfortable and sacrificial. But like, we lose focus of that and we begin to think life is lived primarily for ourselves and not for God and for his people and for his mission. And so when life becomes uncomfortable, we're immediately like, how do I get out? What's causing me the most discomfort? Oh, it's this ministry because I got to deal with this and I don't have the time or whatever. And maybe there are times when you step away from things.
Sure.
I'm not saying that. But if that's like the pattern of a person's life, like every time my ministry gets hard, I just withdraw from it.
Yeah.
Then that just shows you're not Christ-like in that area, you know?
On the other side too, can't you continue to do what we would call like ministry though, out of a heart though that's not really like you're just, it's begrudging and it's drudgery,
right?
And all you can see is the difficulty of it. You don't ever see joy.
Yeah,
you know.
Yep.
That's another side where you're like, well, that's the flip side. So like, I think there's an element where you can go like, yep, this is challenging and hard.
Right.
Jesus commands me to do it,
and
I can find joy in this. And here are areas of joy. Here are areas of I think that's a normal response to life and ministry.
And I think a lot of it is, that's why chapters John 13 are here, so that we look at this, and then just like it's doing with us as we're discussing it, we're thinking about Jesus in this way, and we're like, man, that's the way he was. That's the way we should be, and I want to be. So God help me with that. And so if we get into either of the dilemmas of, on the one hand, I don't want to do anything because it takes me too much time or whatever. And on the other hand, I'll do it, but I don't really want to do this, but I'm just going to do it because I'm going to serve like Jesus said or whatever. But it's like,
but I hate it.
But we should be looking at Jesus and let the Spirit then help us be like him. And then we'll find the joy in it, right?
Yeah. So then does the verse 35 kind of like tie it all together when he says, you know, okay, this way of loving one another and serving one another as I have served you, then all people will know that you're my disciples. This kind of connects back to the glory aspect, right? In a sense that Jesus is glorified through his blood-bought, redeemed people, loving one another. Thereby, what are we doing? When we love one another, we're giving glory to Jesus. We are the outshining of his saving work and person. And well, we're his body. right?
That's good.
And so that's that kind of actually puts a bigger like a cosmic reality on it. You know, and Paul says in Ephesians that the church is testifying to powers outside of this world in a sense, like they're looking at the church going, and so not only are we doing it as this world, but outside as well.
That's right.
So
that's good.
Anything else on John 13?
I think we can leave it there.
All right. Well, we hope this conversation has been helpful even as we kind of meander from topic to topic and insert our various thoughts and things like that. But we hope it's helpful for you. Our goal is to help the people of Calvary Bible Church follow Christ by becoming better readers and students of the Bible. If you're not a part of our church, our hope and prayer is that our conversations will help you love the Scriptures more and serve your local church better. We love to hear from our listeners, get feedback on what we've discussed. Several episodes ago, we asked who has listened to the podcast from episode 1. I've only gotten Andrew back. He said he started on episode 8. So I don't know if there's
probably wise.
That's probably wise. Anyway, you can always contact us, give us feedback on what we're discussing, or send us topics if you'd like us to discuss them. You can email us at thecalvarycast@gmail.com. Again, if the podcast has been helpful too, you can leave a rating, a review, or both. Share the podcast with others who you think would be benefited from it. Don't leave us any 1-star ratings, or you could. That'd be cool too.
No, I really wouldn't. Don't. Please.
At Calvary, we exist for the glory of God, the good of his people, and the Great Commission. So until next time.